Travel to an era where steel settled disputes and the shadow of the plague danced over our villages. Forget those dreamy castles and silken ladies right now. The truth, I tell you, was that every dawn was a battle won against starvation and disease, a constant test of the strength residing in the chest of every man and woman. So, before sleep claims you, offer me your attention, as a soldier lends an ear to the voice of his captain. And if you find value in my words, join our cause. Subscribe to this channel called Silent of History. Let the light in your room dim, like the flame of a candle at dusk, and allow my voice to guide you through the paths of time. In this vigil we share. Open your eyes, comrade. It is the year of our Lord, 1190. Blink and accustom yourself to the gloom of your humble lodging in this Crusader camp. Last night, no doubt, was a struggle against exhaustion. Banish from your mind feather beds and soft linens. Your rest, most certainly, was upon a rough pallet, filled with hard straw or hay, perhaps sharing body heat with your comrades, to defy the cold that crept under the tent. The nocturnal symphony was constant. The snores of your brothers in arms echoed in the cramped space, mingling with the distant howls of wolves roaming the camp and the nervous whinnies of horses. The air, heavy and unrefined, brought with it a mix of unpleasant effluvia. From the lack of hygiene after long marches to the strong smell of congregated animals and, let's not deceive ourselves, the emanations from improvised latrines, simple pits dug in the earth, the insistent bites of fleas, lice, and other small nocturnal demons were a perpetual torture, frustrating any attempt to find respite. And in the deep darkness, where imagination gallops unleashed, the mind could easily wander to the real and imaginary dangers lurking beyond your tent canvas. Lurking thieves in the rear, Saracen tribes prowling in the distance, and even the old stories of specters and evil genies whispered around the campfires. Restful sleep was a scarce commodity, often interrupted by the seeping cold, the discomforts of the bed, and the constant sense of vulnerability in this foreign land. Curiously, some of our more superstitious squires assure us that placing certain aromatic herbs under the pallet helps repel these annoying visitors, although their effectiveness, I fear, is as uncertain as the enemy's next move. Your eyelids struggle to stay open as the distant but potent prayer horn cleaves the morning air. It is our version of the church bell, only infinitely more martial and, for some, equally uninspiring of religious fervor. Your home is a section of a communal tent, devoid of any semblance of privacy, where you share living space with your comrades, your weapons, and a legion of opportunistic insects that seem to have sworn allegiance to all flags. The smell, that mixture, a subtle combination of stale wine from the night before, the effluvium of sweat after training or battle, the unmistakable aroma of uncurried leather, and something you fervently hope is not gangrene, although deep down, you know that is the most likely explanation. Delicate perfumes are an unknown luxury on this crusade, and even if they existed, their soft essence would quickly be lost in the whirlwind of odors of this constantly moving camp. You try to stretch your numb limbs, but a creak from your joints reminds you of your condition. In your 20s, in the calculations of this campaign, you are already dangerously approaching maturity. Your back creaks like an old crossbow being tautened, and your knees sound like two squires arguing over an extra ration. The simple act of getting up is an undertaking that requires willpower. The dirt floor under your tent is damp from the night's dew, which has mercilessly seeped through the canvas, or else it is covered by a suspicious layer, courtesy of some wandering animal that has sought shelter nearby. Either way, the skin of your bare feet is now, unwillingly, part of this peculiar camp ecosystem. What strange sight greets you at this dawn? A few spans away, your closest companions, perhaps some newly arrived squire who still doesn't know the unspoken rules of personal space, begin to stretch and groan with morning aches. Forget the intimacy of an individual alcove, of a simple blanket offering visual respite to the sleepy gaze, or of an instant of solitude to organize the thoughts that morning brings. Here, existence is intrinsically communal, shared down to the last and most meager portion of personal space. Your day dawns on this crusade, where privacy is a distant memory, as an invisible legion of tenacious parasites, curious mice sniffing in every corner, and at least 4 other men share the meager space of your tent, and thus, immersed in this peculiar cacophony of presences and morning murmurs, your day begins. Believe me, considering the lack of space and constant company, the prospect of an interesting day takes on a quite particular meaning. Curiously, among the lower ranks, it is common for young apprentices to sleep at their mentors' feet, both for safety and to learn the rudiments of warfare from birth. So, with effort, and perhaps some pained grunt, you manage to get out of your campaign bed. Good for that small morning victory. Now, the call of nature makes itself felt, and it is not a polite invitation, but an impatient prize that demands immediate attention. It is at these moments when the nostalgic memory of the stone latrines of your native castle begins to bloom in your mind. Here you will find no deep and relatively clean pits, no polished wooden seats, not even the coarse leaves sometimes used for hygiene. In this campaign, the simple act of relieving your bowels is an expedition in itself, a test of endurance, and often an exercise in patience. If your post places you near the rear, your latrine will probably consist of a shallow trench dug just outside the camp, which will already be dangerously close to its maximum capacity due to the previous night's fermented barley excesses. The aroma emanating from it rivals the most vivid descriptions of hell, holding your breath as if crossing a field of arrows. You do what you have to do, and then here comes the less glorious part. You cover it superficially with dirt, praying that the flies don't follow you to the quartermaster's table. If fortune has granted you the privilege of residing near the center of the camp, perhaps you will find a communal latrine, a rough structure shared by dozens of men. There you can experience the pleasant company of strangers sitting side by side, in an uncomfortable silence, interrupted only by the inevitable sounds. Perhaps you might even be encouraged to exchange some complaints about the food, but I strongly advise you to avoid breathing deeply the surrounding air. It is curious that even in these precarious circumstances, some of our most veteran sergeants insist on maintaining a certain distance between latrines and water sources, although the effectiveness of this measure is, at best, debatable, given the ephemeral nature of our settlements. Forget freshly squeezed orange juice or a comforting oat milk latte. Here, at 6 in the morning, if you even have a precise way of telling time, what runs down your throat is beer. Yes, beer. The reason? Simple and chilling. Water is a breeding ground for parasites and all kinds of filth. So you start your day with watered-down, low-alcohol beer, but high in the crucial task of keeping you alive. Pages drink it too. Nobody is thrilled with its earthy taste, but at least it offers a reasonable probability of not dying of dysentery in the short term. Do you long for a piece of roasted meat or a chunk of aged cheese? You can dream of it. Those delicacies are reserved for feast days and perhaps some special celebration in honor of King Richard, and only if the quartermaster feels particularly generous that day. Most knights of rank do not taste meat more than a few times a year on campaign, an ephemeral luxury in a life dedicated to war. As for fresh fruit, only when Mother Nature deigns to offer it in its season, and always with the caution that it has not spontaneously fermented into some primitive wine. And don't even dare to think about spices, unless blue blood runs through your veins. A simple pinch of pepper can cost more than your meager monthly salary. Salt is such a precious commodity that it is kept under lock and key, as if it were ground gold. So you chew your hard bread, swallow your morning beer, and make a conscious effort not to imagine the weevil that may have been gnawing on your meager ration overnight. Breakfast does not infuse you with energy. It simply happens as an inevitable event in the monotony of the day. And now that you are properly malnourished, the task of preparing for battle, or the long march, awaits you, as if your life depended on it. Because in effect, it does. Once you have consumed your sad and frugal medieval breakfast, it is time to get dressed. Not that the clothing will offer much comfort. By the way, your wardrobe consists with millimeter precision of a single campaign outfit. First, there's the chainmail that chafes and weighs, or a padded gambeson you've worn every day for months, possibly even years. Forget seasonal trends or the thrill of new clothing. Here, the only fashion is wearing what you have until it disintegrates from wear or graces you with a charming skin rash. Underwear is optional. If luck smiles upon you, perhaps you possess a linen undershirt. If not, well, you'll go directly under layers of rough, sweaty wool, all carefully stitched by some campaign tailor who probably had a very vague idea of what decent stitching should look like. There's no personal laundress either, no scented soap, nor, of course, the remotest possibility of finding a dry cleaner, so your clothes are inevitably stained, stiff with accumulated dirt, and emanating an aroma reminiscent of a poorly ventilated stable after a sandstorm. Even if you intended to wash your garments, it wouldn't be a simple task. You'd have to carry water from the nearest river, or well, laboriously heat it over a smoking campfire, scrub your gambeson against a rough stone, perhaps using some improvised lye, and then hang it in the sun. A star that deigns to appear, hopefully, a few days a month in this relentless land. And don't even get me started on footwear. If you are fortunate enough to possess some form of foot protection, it will probably consist of crude pieces of uncured leather, barely stitched together, and offering about as much arch support as a slippery banana peel. Most soldiers simply wander about in their campaign boots, worn sticky with mud, omnipresent dung, and what we might call medieval minefields, also known as sharp, treacherous rocks and puddles of stagnant water teeming with invisible diseases. All of this translates into a single, painful truth. Your skin hates you. You suffer from a constant and relentless situation. Fleas, lice, mice, and bedbugs have established permanent and free residences on your body. Everyone suffers equally. Pompous nobles, clerics in their habits, pages in their ragged clothes, all are essentially walking insect farms. No one escapes this plague. It's perfectly normal to scratch your armpit with a knife handle while conversing with the regimental chaplain, and no one will even bat an eye at such an everyday act. Your skin is raw from the constant chafing of your uniform's rough fabrics. Your scalp is a veritable battlefield strewn with inflamed bites, and if you're unlucky enough to develop a skin rash, well, tough luck. There's no field doctor specializing in skin conditions, no miracle cure, no one who can diagnose you with what is likely scabies. You simply continue to suffer in silence, and if you're incredibly fortunate not to contract a secondary infection, great. That rash will simply become your inseparable companion for the next few months. An unwanted medieval guest who will accompany you every step of your miserable campaign existence. Now that you're dressed in campaign rags and wrapped in constant nagging discomfort, it's time to go out and perform your duties to the point of extreme exhaustion. Now that you're fully attired in itchiness and damp wool, perhaps a radiant morning smile would be appropriate. Except you won't, because in this era, smiling is a dangerous game. Not emotionally, but dentally. There are no toothbrushes, no mint-flavored toothpaste, no refreshing mouthwash, no delicate dental floss. The concept of oral hygiene is as popular as the idea of regular bathing on campaign. That is, practically non-existent. Some might chew on a fibrous twig or rinse their mouth with wine or diluted vinegar, but for the most part, your teeth are left to their own devices, and they are not doing well at all. By the time you reach your late 20s, your smile will have the spectral charm of something freshly exhumed from a haunted crypt. Cavities are rampant, mercilessly gnawing away at the enamel. Gums are swollen and inflamed, an unhealthy red or purple, and those dark stains on your teeth are not mere food remnants. That is advanced decay, the slow but inexorable decomposition of your dentition. You have more rot in your mouth than a forgotten medieval root cellar. Sugar, though not yet ubiquitous in a soldier's diet, is sometimes found in special rations or loot. Imported at exorbitant cost, it is primarily used in small sweets or as an ostentatious symbol of wealth among nobles. If you are of noble birth, congratulations. You will be able to rot your teeth at a much faster rate than your humbly born comrades in arms. If you are of humble origin, your decay will be slower but constant, caused by hard bread, salted meat, and years of arduous chewing. Toothaches will become a constant in your life. Get used to them. They are like the weather of this land, always present in the background, a constant reminder of the harshness of existence. It is the kind of throbbing pain that will make you seriously consider fervent prayer, drowning your sorrows in more campaign beer, or, in an act of desperation, trying to extract the tooth yourself with a pair of crude blacksmith's pliers. And this is not a joke. That was a real treatment, occasionally an extreme need. Dentists as a profession do not exist in the army, but barber surgeons do. Yes, the same individual who cuts your hair with dull scissors also takes care of extracting teeth by the dim light of a candle, using an iron hook and without the slightest bit of anesthesia. If you have an infected tooth, I hope you enjoy high fevers, because without the marvel of modern antibiotics, a simple dental infection can easily degenerate into sepsis and send you prematurely to your grave from a mere toothache. That's right. What today prompts us to visit the camp apothecary could be, on this crusade, the prelude to your own funeral. And the social sphere doesn't offer much comfort either. Kissing. Good luck with that. Halitosis. That morning, evening, and night breath that could fell a Saracen, is omnipresent. If you're single, your attractiveness is not measured by the whiteness of your smile, but by your bravery in battle, the quality of your armor, and the generosity of your lord. In short, your mouth is a perpetual battlefield, and it is losing the war spectacularly. Now that you feel the pangs of your battered teeth, let's go outside, because your true work, the one that will bend your back into a bow, is just beginning. It's time to fulfill your duties. Except there's no office with a view, no tidy desk, no revitalizing stale wine break, no remote possibility of a quick promotion. Your job, if you are a knight of Richard the Lionheart, is to serve your king with loyalty and valor. You rise with the first rays of the sun and stop only when it hides behind the hills of this foreign land. Your tools, your sword, your spear, your shield, and the armor you wear. There is no concept of a weekend, no fixed quitting time. There is only the relentless cycle from dawn to dusk, day after day. Perhaps you will have a day off to recover from battles or long marches, but only if your commander deems it necessary. The work is brutal, a constant test of endurance. You march miles under the scorching sun, fight fierce enemies, stand guard during long, cold nights, and build improvised fortifications. No one cares if you are exhausted to the bone. No one asks about your mental health. These are concerns for troubadours or idle clerics. Well, if fortune, or misfortune, depending on how you look at it, has assigned you the female gender, and you follow the army as a vivandière or servant. Surprise. Your workday isn't limited to camp chores. You also have the slight task of caring for the wounded, often gruesome scenes. Washing soldiers' clothes, a lost battle against blood and mud, cooking often with meager and dubious rations, helping to maintain order in the camp, and pretending that the inevitable infestation of soldiers' lice isn't slowly but surely spreading to your side of the tent. Children begin to help around 7 or 8 years old. No school, no toys, to distract from the harsh reality. Just small tasks to perform, and the grim dream of perhaps, someday, not dying from an infected wound or a camp disease. And if you're one of the lucky few not directly involved in quartermaster duties, perhaps you're a craftsman traveling with the army as a blacksmith, saddler, or carpenter, great. Still, your day is spent working with scorching fire, foul-smelling tanned leather, or heavy wood, all in improvised workshops where inhaling smoke and splinters is part of the work landscape. The pay is, basically, the Army's promise of protection and the opportunity to sell your goods. Job benefits include occasional burns, the possibility of cutting yourself with sharp tools, and, in general, a good dose of bad luck. Do you have a fever? Drink some warm wine, the same kind you drank last night, and keep working. You can't afford to stop, not even for a day, because if you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat enough, this army has a very simple solution for that. Be replaced by someone more in need. So you grab your hammer, ignore the blisters blooming on your hands, and keep forging. Because on this crusade, your work is not a career. It is a grueling, slow-motion test of endurance, where the ultimate prize is simply to live one more day, to repeat it all. Now that your back burns with the memory of working in the fields, let's talk about the weather. That capricious master that rules their lives. Because on this crusade, the temperature is less about defined seasons and more about a continuous test sent from the heavens. Let's start with winter in these distant lands. There is no insulation in your tent walls, no constant campfire offering respite from the penetrating cold, no waterproof tarpaulins to keep out the damp. Only crude canvas walls, with gaps where the icy mountain wind seeps in. Your windows are simple openings, covered with ragged pieces of cloth, not the transparent luxury of your castle's glass. The fire in the brazier, pleasant in theory, often dwindles to a few dying embers, as there isn't always enough dry wood to keep it burning constantly. Firewood is a precious commodity in this desolate land. You wrap yourself in your single damp wool cloak, huddle as close as possible to the scarce embers, and still wake up with the tip of your nose dangerously cold. Your feet are permanently frozen, often damp from moisture seeping through the ground. Your fingers become so numb they feel like small medieval ice cubes, stiff and insensitive. Frostbite is not accurately diagnosed. It is simply considered bad luck or an inevitable consequence of winter on campaign. Now let's fast forward to summer in this scorching land. Sounds better, right? Wrong. In summer, your humble tent transforms into a suffocating oven. There's no fan to move the stale air, no refreshing drafts, and of course, absolutely no perfume to mitigate the effects of heat and sweat. You sweat profusely through your multiple layers of armor and clothing, but you cannot remove them completely, as showing too much skin is not proper for a knight, and moreover, exposes you to painful sunburn, voracious insect bites, and the relentless judgment of your more puritanical comrades. Flies are ubiquitous, irresistibly drawn to your unwashed body, and the persistent aroma of last week's salted meat still permeating the air. Mosquitoes buzz insistently near your ears as you try to fall asleep, assuming you can sleep with the chorus of your comrades' snores and the occasional cries of sentinels. Under the scorching sun of this land, you bake mercilessly, with no sunscreen to protect you, no adequate helmet to fully cover you, unless you have improvised something crude with cloth or leather. And worst of all, you still have to perform your duties under this inclement sun. Heat stroke is not diagnosed. It is simply considered having a bad day or being unwell. So, for most of the year, you are either shivering in your own damp misery, wondering if your toes will survive until spring, or you are sweating profusely under your armor while the chafing causes you painful rashes. And the one thing that never changes, regardless of the season, is that your clothes still itch relentlessly, your food remains bland, and your next guard duty or battle still awaits, relentless and inevitable. Welcome to Crusader-style climate control. There is no such thing. Do you feel a scratchy throat? Do you long for a breath of fresh air? Do you wish you could splash cold water on your face to awaken from this damp nightmare that is life on campaign? Tough luck. In this era, water is not always your friend. In fact, sometimes it's silently conspiring to send you to an early grave. Let's start with the basics. Drinking. That nearby stream may look tempting, bubbling and crystal clear, evoking idyllic images from the chanson de geste. But, medieval spoiler alert, don't be fooled. Upstream, someone has most likely washed their dirty clothes, or even disposed of the remains of some dead animal. And if not that, perhaps invisible parasites, a myriad of bacteria, and the entire microbial army of this land await in every seemingly innocent sip. This is why people resorted to campaign wine, however watered down, even the pages. The fermentation process and low alcohol content made it much safer than any cloudy liquid flowing through the camp ditches. Well, water was a better option, if the camp had one, and it was relatively clean. Curiously, the monks who often accompanied the Crusades were adept at water management, and sometimes built rudimentary filtration systems, though these were rare luxuries in the heat of campaign. And what about bathing? Surely water was used for personal hygiene, right? In theory, yes. In practice, a resounding no. You see, at that time, a curious belief prevailed among some. Bathing actually opened the skin's pores, allowing dreaded diseases to enter the body without resistance. That's right. Washing was considered a medically risky activity by some. One was supposed to remain cleaner, apparently, if one never shed that protective layer of dirt firmly adhered to the epidermis. Improvised baths existed in some larger camps, yes, but they quickly gained a reputation for being hotbeds of disease and, at times, unedifying activities. So, naturally, the chaplains, always vigilant about morals, intervened and advised against such practices. Even if the idea of a bath assailed you, it was a logistical production. You would need to haul heavy water from the well or river, laboriously heated over a smoking campfire, fill a wooden tub that probably leaked more than it held, and then pray fervently that no one else in the camp used it before you, or, worse, after, contaminating your precious bath. And then there was rainwater, diligently collected in open barrels, where birds left their contributions. Insects bred freely, and moss thrived in a damp, dark environment. Sounds refreshing, right? So, whether it enters your mouth, soaks your body, or washes your armor, water on this crusade was less a source of life than a dangerous gamble. One wrong sip, and you could spend your last days sweating feverishly on your straw pallet, writhing in abdominal pain, and mentally reviewing all the questionable decisions that led you to this point. The next time you drink from your canteen, raise an imaginary glass to our ancestors. They didn't have the luxury of safe hydration, so they drank the water. Or perhaps they didn't. Perhaps they just stubbed their toe on a disappointment-shaped rock. Either way, you're sick. You need help. You need a doctor. Tough luck. You live in the Middle Ages, where medicine on campaign is, in essence, a form of polite torture adorned with uncertain herbal remedies and prayers. Let's start with the diagnosis, the basis of all treatment. Any ailment that afflicts you, be it a simple cough, a suspicious skin rash, a broken bone from a clumsy fall, or the dreaded bubonic plague, is invariably attributed to an imbalance in your humors. These four humors, pillars of medieval medicine, were blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to the science of the time, your health depended on maintaining these bodily fluids in a precarious harmony, like a perfectly balanced internal soup. Do you have a fever? Clearly, an excess of blood is consuming you. The logical response, a good bloodletting. That's right. Let's drain your life force into a bowl using a dull blade or a hungry leech that hasn't tasted a meal in days. And yes, barbers often performed this delicate procedure on campaign. Imagine going to get your beard trimmed and ending up losing a good amount of blood in the same session. 2 for 1, comrade. Do you feel sad or anxious? Evidently, you suffer from an excess of black bile. The prescribed cure, potent laxatives, perhaps a hot herbal purge of dubious efficacy, or simply fervent prayers, and a cold compress on your forehead, while everyone around you discreetly avoids eye contact and begins carving your wooden cross. Now, if you have the misfortune of breaking a bone or suffering a deep, nasty wound in battle, you are in serious trouble. There is no anesthesia, unless you count the possibility of fainting from pain as a form of temporary relief. Surgery, if you can call it that, is performed with knives that probably haven't been cleaned since the last skirmish. Tools are often heated over a fire, not for sterilization. That concept is still far from being understood, but because they simply seem more intimidating that way. Antibiotics are a distant dream, centuries away in the future. Germ theory, fundamental to understanding the spread of disease in the camp, has not yet been conceived. Instead, is it believed that disease comes from stale air, or is it a manifestation of divine displeasure for your obvious moral failings? Does your stomach hurt? Your sinful thoughts must have been to blame. I hope you enjoy confessing your transgressions while incessantly vomiting. If your condition worsens despite these treatments, you will most likely be cured with more eager leeches, perhaps some crushed beetles with unknown medicinal properties, and the comforting presence of a chaplain at your side, administering last rites, just in case. At this point, everyone is preparing for the ultimate cure, death. And if by some inexplicable miracle you recover, everyone will simply assume that God had mercy on your sinful soul. The field surgeon will take all the credit for the healing, and the leech will be promoted to a position of greater prestige. So, yes, on this crusade, medicine is less about curing and more about surviving the cure itself. After a long day of arduous service plagued by lice bites and the unpleasant sensation of leeches, if you were lucky enough to receive medical treatment, it's finally mealtime in the camp. You return to your section of the communal tent with aching feet and a stomach rumbling like a hungry lion, longing for the only joy often left in a soldier's life, a hot meal. Bad news once again. Your food is probably conspiring to join the widespread plot to shorten your existence. Let's start with the basics. Food preservation is practically non-existent on campaign. There's no refrigerator to keep food fresh, no freezer to stop the advance of decomposition. Only salted meat, hard bread, and the fervent hope that the weather doesn't ruin the meager provisions. Your meat, if you're fortunate enough to receive a ration, will have been hanging for days, adorned with a cloud of buzzing flies, submerged in a dubious brine, and possibly discreetly shared with some hungry camp rat. Bread is the cornerstone of the Army's diet, the basis of almost every meal. But even this humble source of sustenance is not without its dangers. In years of bad harvests in England, the bread that arrives on campaign is sometimes filled with less appetizing ingredients to stretch scarce grain reserves. And if it's rye season, there's an additional risk: ergot, a parasitic fungus that can cause violent convulsions, terrible hallucinations, and sometimes death. It's like eating a piece of bread with poison as a side dish. Vegetables are only available when the season and logistics allow. And do you know what's almost always in season in rations? Salted meat and hard bread. Countless portions of salted meat and hard bread, boiled to boredom, reduced to a bland stew or floating suspiciously in a mysterious pottage that, if you recall from previous chapters, is basically a hot swamp of unidentified ingredients that has been simmering since before you embarked. Some dried fruit may be available, but it spoils quickly in warm weather. And sugar, that white, granular luxury, is rare, expensive, and hoarded by nobles who use it mainly to show off their teeth blackened by overconsumption. Dairy is another risky gamble on campaign. Fresh milk sours in a matter of hours under the sun. Butter and cheese last a little better, but are often laden with invisible bacteria. People consume them anyway, because frankly, the alternative is chewing on the sole of their ragged boot. And let's talk about condiments. Spices like black pepper, aromatic cinnamon, or exotic nutmeg are worth more than gold to the average knight. For them, flavor comes mainly from onions, if they're lucky, salt, if they're even luckier, and perhaps a pinch of bitter resignation. Most meals taste like a piece of soaked leather sprinkled with a generous dose of sadness. But food is not only a health hazard, it's also a delicate logistical matter in the Army. Rations depend on supply and are sometimes scarce. If you're caught stealing food, you could be severely punished. That's right, your dinner could literally lead to a lashing. So, as you sit eating your grayish stew in the flickering light of a campfire, remember that every bite is a potential risk. But you eat anyway, because on this crusade, food doesn't always nourish. Often, it merely tests you. The day draws to a close. You have worked to exhaustion, suffered the hardships of the day, and barely managed to digest that dubious ration that served as your dinner. You might think the day's tribulations are over, but do not allow yourself complete relaxation, because in this medieval army, the omnipresent gaze of God encompasses everything. So does that of the local chaplain, whose moral judgment weighs on every one of your actions, not to mention your more pious comrades, whose murmurs would not hesitate to point out any deviation from the straight path. In this medieval world, you now inhabit in your campaign. Dreams, religion is not merely an aspect of life. It is life itself, the fundamental structure that holds everything together. The Church exercises tight control over every facet of your existence on this crusade. Your calendar is marked by religious festivities. The laws of the kingdom are imbued with Christian morality. Your education, if you were fortunate enough to learn letters, is shaped by doctrine, and your birth, marriage, death, and everything that happens between these milestones is irrevocably linked to religious rites and precepts. Think of the Church as your spiritual guide, a constant presence that watches over your soul. Each day is rigidly structured around the ringing of prayer bells that travel with the army. The bell rings at dawn, at noon, and at nightfall, not as a mere reminder, but as a divine obligation. Missing prayer is a grave sin. Forgetting to cross yourself when passing a sacred relic, a sin. Consuming meat on a Friday, a day of abstinence, is a sin. Allowing impure thoughts about your comrade-in-arms wife to settle in your nightly dreams, double sin. And yes, hell is a tangible reality, vividly described in the chaplain's sermons. They paint it in chilling detail, rivers of eternal fire, lakes of boiling blood, sharp-toothed demons, and the agonizing wails of damned souls echoing for all eternity. If the threat of the Saracens fails to instill fear in you, the prospect of eternal damnation surely will. You don't have the possibility of reading the Holy Scriptures for yourself, as they are written in Latin, an arcane language reserved for learned monks, influential clerics, and perhaps some literate noble. You depend entirely on the Church's interpretation to understand the world around you and your place in it. This means that if the chaplain decrees that bad fortune in battle is divine punishment for not having prayed fervently enough, well, it's time to kneel more diligently and recite more prayers. Tithes, the obligatory giving of a portion of your loot or income, are unavoidable for the Church's sustenance. Holidays are, in essence, holy days, and the medieval calendar is full of them. Although they offer a welcome respite from strenuous military service, they are not occasions for unrestrained joy. Attending Mass in the camp chapel, practicing ritual fasting, confessing sins to the chaplain, and constantly reminding yourself that humility and piety are chivalrous virtues are the appropriate activities for these days of rest. Questioning the Church's authority is a dangerous act. Heretics are excommunicated and handed over to secular authorities if the king so desires. Suspected witches are subjected to cruel trials, with fatal results in most cases. Blasphemers are publicly punished as a deterrent, and skeptics are quickly rehabilitated through persuasive methods. So you follow the imposed formalities, sing the hymns, bow reverently, pray fervently that your soul, after enduring this earthly existence full of privations on campaign, will finally reach heavenly paradise. Assuming, of course, that you manage to remain in grace with divine designs and Church mandates. Curiously, the omnipresence of religion also manifested itself in daily camp life in unexpected ways. For example, church bells, which sometimes traveled with the army, not only marked the hours of prayer, but could also serve as warnings of enemy attacks, fires, or even to signal the beginning and end of communal tasks. If you thought the life of a medieval knight was tough, imagine living that same existence in the skin of a woman following the army. All the filth, constant hunger, and omnipresent fear, compounded by the endless cycle of childbirth, social subjugation, and almost total invisibility. In the Middle Ages, being a woman is like playing a video game on the highest difficulty mode, with no health potions to alleviate suffering, and no reset button offering a second chance. From the moment of her birth, a girl's life path is practically predetermined. Marry young, give birth to a succession of children, serve her husband tirelessly, and die exhausted by work and privations. Education is a remote possibility, unless they come from a noble family and are sent to a convent, in which case their intellectual development stops approximately at the point where they learn to churn butter efficiently and mend a tunic without leaving too many holes. Marriage occurs at a surprisingly early age, often in early adolescence. It's not uncommon to be betrothed at 12 and pregnant at 14. It's not about romantic love or personal affinity, but about ensuring the continuity of family lands, increasing the number of livestock, and forging strategic alliances between families. Their opinion on the matter is, at best, irrelevant. Once married, she essentially becomes her husband's property. Her primary duty is to produce male heirs, to secure the lineage, feed the entire, often extended family, keep her humble abode functional, and, above all, not complain, as any display of discontent could lead to her being labeled a vociferous harridan, or, worse, a malevolent witch. This latter label comes with the courtesy of drowning in the local pond or a purifying burning at the public stake, depending on the prevailing fashion in her region. Childbirth is a deadly lottery with alarming odds. There is no prenatal care, no sterilized instruments, not the slightest bit of anesthesia to relieve the excruciating pain. Midwives do their best with the limited knowledge of the time, but even minor complications can mean certain death for the mother, the newborn child, or both. Some women manage to survive 10 or more pregnancies, but many don't survive the first. But don't worry, once the baby enters the world, their workload only increases. Now they have a screaming newborn in a flea-infested hovel and are expected to breastfeed constantly, cook for everyone, clean up messes, keep helping with tough farm chores, and also attend to their husband's needs. They have no rest. They are the rest for everyone else. If they are unmarried, they are objects of suspicion and malicious gossip. If they are widowed, they are considered vulnerable and easy prey. If they are too outspoken or independent, they are considered dangerous and subversive. Women who did not conform to social norms were often accused of witchcraft, especially if they possessed knowledge of medicinal herbs, displayed a strong, independent personality, or simply looked at someone strangely on a rainy Tuesday. Even in the religious sphere, their role is limited and subordinate. Nuns lived under strict and claustrophobic rules, forbidden to speak without explicit permission, severely restricted freedom of movement, and their spiritual value was always ranked below that of men. In short, if you are a woman in the Middle Ages, you are expected to endure privations in silence, obey without question, reproduce diligently, and suffer with resignation, ideally with a smile on your lips. Because even in an era of universal suffering, women were somehow expected to suffer with grace and posture. So far on your medieval dream journey, you've managed to navigate the plague of lice, the persistent companionship of leeches if you fell ill, the misery of an existence with hardly any hygiene, and the constant threat of brutal punishment for a minor infraction, not to mention the danger of terrible battles. But now the final chapter approaches, the most common fate in medieval life, an early and usually inglorious death. If in this sleepy fantasy world you find yourself alive and still breathing after 40, consider yourself practically a respected elder in the camp. Let's coldly analyze the numbers. Average life expectancy hovered around 30 or 40 years. But that number was drastically skewed by terrifying infant mortality. Almost half of all children didn't live to celebrate their 5th birthday. A common illness, chronic malnutrition, or a particularly relentless winter was all it took to snuff out a young life. No vaccines offering protection, no antibiotics fighting infections, no glimmer of hope for effective medical intervention. If you managed to survive childhood, you entered adulthood already exhausted, marked by privations and early labor. The workday began as soon as you could hold a sword, and by 20 your joints creaked with the lament of an old abandoned monastery door. You would likely have lost several teeth in fights or to infections, perhaps a finger in a training accident, and certainly most of your original optimism would have vanished like morning dew. Women faced a particularly deadly ordeal: childbirth. It was one of the leading causes of death for medieval women. No painkillers to mitigate the searing pain, no life-saving medical interventions, just fervent prayer, hot water compresses, and the hand of an experienced midwife holding hers as they bled out on a straw-filled bed. For men, the dangers were different, but equally relentless. Brutal training accidents, infections spreading rapidly from minor wounds, the blind fury of a drunk comrade in a trivial dispute, or the haphazard fate of a battle that went terribly wrong. Even a simple reconnaissance mission could be a risky undertaking if you crossed paths with bored bandits looking for easy victims or a bad-tempered tax collector. Death could also come silently, spreading like a dark shadow through plague, which turned entire camps into silent cemeteries overnight, or through devastating famine that could last entire seasons, decimating entire companies and leaving behind a landscape of desolation, or simply by sheer bad luck, like consuming contaminated rations and spending the last hours of your existence feverishly hallucinating and shouting at the empty walls of your tent. And as for funerals, you could consider yourself lucky if you got one. Bodies were often hastily buried in mass graves to prevent the spread of disease. No embalming to preserve the remains, no polished coffins to honor the deceased, just a hastily dug hole, some mumbled prayers to the wind, and a shallow mound of dirt if enough space remained in the crowded camp cemetery. So, yes, in medieval times, life was brutal, short, and constantly besieged by death in all its often inexplicable and random forms. There was no retirement. You simply stopped showing up one day, a victim of the relentless dance of life and death. And speaking of exits, let's allow your dream consciousness to gradually fade, reaching the final chapter of this medieval immersion. The medieval dream fades, so reflect for a moment on how your imaginary day unfolded. You woke up in filth, relieved yourself in a foul-smelling ditch, tried in vain to clean your teeth with illusions, almost fainted from ravenous hunger, performed your duties until your body begged for mercy, suffered the torture of endlessly itching rough wool, prayed fervently not to fall in battle, and barely managed to dodge brutal punishment for a minor infraction. Welcome to a single day, condensed and slightly exaggerated, in Crusader medieval Europe. Do you still dream of becoming a valiant knight in shining armor? Think again. That idealized version of the Middle Ages, with gallant knights courting noble ladies in towering castles, heroic battles fought with honor, and lavish feasts in grand halls lit by the warm glow of candles, is a myth carefully polished by chansons de geste and courtly romances. In truth, the medieval world was gritty, cruel, and profoundly unjust. Social hierarchy was everything, an unbreakable chain that bound each individual's destiny from birth. If you were born a commoner, your fate was perpetual poverty. If you were born noble, congratulations, You had a greater chance of surviving disease and violence, but you were still one poorly healed wound away from gangrene and ending up in a hasty grave. Even nobles were not immune to misery. Their imposing castles were drafts of icy air, stone fortresses infested with fleas and smoke, and their marriages were often cold political transactions, devoid of affection. Sure, they could enjoy a fur cloak for warmth and a cup of watered-down wine, but they also faced a 50% chance of dying in a meaningless skirmish or from a stray arrow. It wasn't exactly a paradise of luxury and comfort. Simpler times were not simple at all. They were relentless and demanding. Everything required more time and effort. Everything hurt more, and every action, from childbirth to the simple act of chewing a piece of hard bread, carried potentially serious consequences. Life was a constant struggle for survival, not a pleasant leisure. And if you found a moment of tranquility to reflect, to dream of something better, to imagine a different future, there wasn't much you could do about it. No significant upward social mobility for most, no help from modern medicine, no possibility of searching codices for what this strange rash was. They lived, suffered, worked, and died within a relatively short radius of the castle or village where they were born. But here lies the most surprising and moving paradox. Despite all these unimaginable difficulties, people still laughed heartily in camp taverns, sang melancholic songs around campfires after battle, gathered to tell stories of bravery and loss, fell passionately in love under the moonlight, and found meaning and purpose even in the most adverse circumstances. They did not do so because life was easy or fair, but because human nature is intrinsically resilient and stubborn. Even in the darkest chapters of their history, they managed to create small spaces for light and hope. So tonight, as you slip into your campaign bed, perhaps not as comfortable as your homes, but a refuge nonetheless, enjoying the post-battle silence and the relative safety of the camp, perhaps offer a silent thanks to the modern world and to your ancestors, who fought against rats, hunger, disease, and the yoke of constant war, so that you would not have to. At least, not in the same way. Your story begins in 1584, during what historians politely call a complicated time in Japan. And what you, if you could speak as a newborn, might have called absolute chaos. The Sengoku period, or era of warring states, was less about refined ceremonies and more about who could backstab faster, march armies quicker, and build bigger castles. Basically, it was medieval Japan's version of an aggressive real estate market, only instead of losing a bidding war, you lost your life. You were born in a small village called Miyamoto, nestled in the rugged hills of Harima Province. Your family isn't exactly swimming in gold, no luxurious silk diapers for you. Most likely, you were wrapped in rough peasant cloth and given a wooden spoon to fend off cold breezes. Congratulations, life hands you your first training weapon at birth. Your father, Shinmen Munisai, is a professional swordsman, and by professional, we mean he takes the art of cutting things very seriously. He's a tough man, a stern master, and not exactly the type of dad who plays catch in the yard. No. His idea of spending time with his son would have been, "Here's a wooden sword, Miyamoto. Try not to cry when you fall down." Affection is rare, praise is even rarer, and soft hugs are practically non-existent. But in a brutal and unforgiving world, softness could kill you. Your father wasn't raising a child, he was forging a weapon. From the beginning, there's a wildness in you. You're not the neat, well-behaved child who bows politely and memorizes verses. You're feisty, undisciplined, and probably smelled of mud half the time, while other kids played tag. You were probably devising how to ambush them from behind a tree and declare victory. A subtle foreshadowing of your future career. In short, from the moment you opened your eyes to the dazzling Japanese sunlight, your destiny was already whispering in your ear. You were not meant to live a quiet, peaceful life. You were meant to fight, to wander, and to carve your name into history, one jewel at a time. Preferably looking slightly disheveled, and, judging by the state of the country, you were about to get a lot of practice. Your playground is not a grassy field or a cozy backyard. It's the hard dirt of Miyamoto Village, where the wind smells of smoke, steel, and a little too much horse. Forget lullabies and fairy tales. Your bedtime stories are about brave samurai cleaving enemies in half with a single stroke. Your mobile probably consisted of a few rusty swords hanging precariously from the ceiling. From the moment you can walk, or rather toddle like a tiny, drunken warrior, your father Munisai has you wielding practice swords. While other children learn to write simple kanji, you learn to parry a death blow. Call it an unconventional education. There's no participation trophy in your household. If you lose a training match, you don't get a cookie. You get a fresh bruise and a lecture on why hesitation equals death. Munisai is a tough man. Legend has it, he won official jewels under the Ashikaga shogunate, but fatherhood wasn't exactly his strong suit. His love is sharp, practical, and delivered with the subtlety of a cannon blast. Praise? Maybe once, when you didn't fall flat on your face after a hard blow. Otherwise, silence. Because in his mind, survival is its own reward. And yet, something in you thrives under this pressure. While other children dream of banquets and fame, you dream of the rhythms of battle, of predicting an opponent's next move before they make it. You don't see the sword just as a weapon. You see it as an extension of yourself, like an iron heartbeat resonating in your hands. You are not pampered. You are not comforted. Instead, you are polished day after brutal day, like a blade against a wet stone. Even as a child, you begin to grasp the cold truth of your world. Victory isn't about being stronger. It's about being smarter, faster, and a little bit crueler than the guy across from you. Villagers whisper about you. That wild child with a gaze too piercing for his age. That child who never cries when he bleeds. Some shake their heads, others nod in respect. But one thing is clear. When you're barely a teenager, you're already something different. Not just a child. Something much, much more dangerous is growing inside you. It happens when you're 13, that awkward age when most kids are trying to figure out how to fish, or maybe survive a spelling bee. You, however, are preparing to commit legalized murder. Welcome to feudal Japan, where puberty comes with sword fights. A wandering samurai named Arima Kihei arrives in the village. He's from a local martial arts school, and cocky enough to think a village boy would never dare challenge him. Big mistake. News travels fast. Musashi is going to duel a real samurai. The villagers gather, whispering and making discreet bets. Even your own family looks at you as one would look at a chicken marching into a fox's den. They expect a massacre. They expect you to be the one on the ground, bleeding and shamed. But here's the thing. You're not interested in losing. You're 13. You're feisty. You're furious at the world, and you're wielding a wooden sword that still smells of firewood. Not exactly the stuff of heroic legends. Yet, when the duel begins, Arima Kihei does what experienced swordsmen do. He underestimates you. Maybe it's your size. Maybe it's the fact that you probably still have mud smeared on your face from that morning. Big mistake number 2. Without any formal bow or dramatic speeches, you lunge, fast, wild, with pure instinct. You catch him off guard, crashing into him with all the grace of an avalanche. Before the villagers can gasp, before Arima can even compose himself, he's on the ground, whimpering, bleeding, humiliated. An adult samurai defeated by a barefoot teenager wielding a glorified tree branch. You don't just win. You announce to the world that Musashi is not a name to be ignored. It's a name to be feared. Of course, your father's reaction is complicated. Pride, perhaps relief, certainly, but also a hint of fear, because even Munasai can see it now. The child he forged is starting to outgrow even his brutal expectations. As for you, you feel nothing but clarity. You were born for this, not to farm, not to bow and scrape, but to duel, to defeat, to rise. First blood has been shed, and somewhere deep in your young heart, you realize it won't be the last. You'd think after your first public victory and recognition, life might settle down. Maybe a nice apprenticeship, perhaps a steady job, carving sandals or fixing roofs. You know, something normal. Not a chance. At 15, you make a decision most adults wouldn't dare. You leave home, no tearful goodbyes, no packed lunch, just a sword, a tattered traveling cloak, and a stubborn refusal to live anyone's life but your own. You become a wanderer, a ronin, in a world where status is everything, where being bound to a lord offers protection and purpose. You choose absolutely none of that. It's like showing up to a medieval job fair, flipping the table, and walking into the forest whistling. Why? Because deep down, you know that if you bind yourself to someone else's house, someone else's rules, you'll never become the warrior you're meant to be. You're not here to play politics. You're not here to polish armor and serve some fat lord. You're here to master the sword on your own terms, or not at all. Of course, wandering isn't exactly glamorous. You sleep under trees, not silk canopies. You eat what you can find, which often means rice if you're lucky, bark if you're not. Your traveling companions are mostly crows, stray dogs, and the occasional curious peasant child whispering, "Mama, why does that man look like he hasn't bathed in a year?" But you don't care. The wilderness becomes your dojo. The rivers sharpen your senses. The cold wind teaches you patience better than any old master. And with every mile you walk, you shed another part of the child you were. The village boy with mud on his feet is gone. The ambitious teenager who beat a samurai is still there. But growing into something fiercer, you begin to seek out dojos, challenging their best students to duels, learning from every strike, every failure, every victory. Your skills evolve fast. Too fast for the world to keep ignoring you. People start whispering your name on dusty roads and in smoky inns. There's a wild ronin out there, a kid with a sword sharper than most men's minds. And somewhere on those endless roads, a new thought grows inside you. Maybe the sword isn't just for killing. Maybe it's a path to something greater than survival. You just have to keep walking. If there's one thing that separates you from the other samurai of your time, it's this: you don't look like one at all. The typical samurai walks into town with his hair carefully oiled, his armor polished to a gleam, his swords tucked neatly at his hip like badges of honor. Meanwhile, you show up looking like you just fought a bear. And maybe you did. Your hair wild, your clothes tattered, stained, sometimes half missing. Your feet probably muddy, definitely calloused. You're not the carefully crafted image of the warrior elite. You're something rarer, something far more unsettling. You look less like a courtly samurai and more like a wild wolf who learned to walk on two legs and somehow picked up a sword along the way. And people notice. Oh boy, do they notice. At first they laugh. Who could take you seriously? You look more suited to chasing chickens than facing seasoned warriors. But the laughter turns to confusion, then to fear. Because once you draw your sword, once you move, all that dirt, that wild animal energy transforms into something terrifyingly efficient. No wasted movements, no hesitation, just pure, unfiltered violence delivered with the grace of a predator. In duels, you don't dance around exchanging pretty cuts for ceremony's sake. You go for the kill. Quick, ugly, final. It's not dishonorable. It's survival. It's the understanding that battles aren't won by who looks best swinging their sword, but by who walks away still breathing. The neat samurai are still worried about their helmet being straight. You're already inside their guard, smashing their pride into the ground. Rumors start to swirl around you like autumn leaves. He fights like a demon. He doesn't fight for points. He fights to survive. If you see him, run the other way. You become a living ghost story passed from village to village, whispered about over cheap sake and campfires. But you don't care about reputation. You don't even care about gaining fame. You only care about one thing: getting better, getting sharper, getting deadlier. Because deep down, you know the world isn't kind to wolves, and only the fiercest survive. With the open road as your home, and a sword as your pillow, you dive headfirst into a new pastime, challenging strangers to deadly fights. Some people collect seashells. You collect victories, preferably before lunch. It's a simple strategy. You roll into a new town, find the local dojo or the most arrogant swordsman lounging around, challenge him to a duel, win, move on. You're like a solitary natural disaster, leaving a trail of bruised egos and broken bones wherever you go. If there were a tourism board for rural Japan, they'd put up warning signs. Beware, wild Ronin crossing. And the best part is, nobody knows how to deal with you. You're too unpredictable, too raw. You don't fight by the book, mainly because you probably never read the book in the first place. You don't wear fancy armor. You don't bow 6 times before drawing your sword. You don't politely wait for your opponent to compose a haiku before the first strike. No, you size them up in an instant. Find the quickest route to victory and take it. Brutal, efficient, and unapologetic. Sometimes you use a real sword, sometimes a wooden stick. Once, according to later legends, you knocked a man unconscious with a boat oar you found lying around. Because for you, it's not about the weapon, but the mind behind it. And your mind is as sharp as a katana's edge and twice as dangerous. With every victory, you learn not just about technique, but about people. How they telegraph their fear through trembling hands. How their eyes widen a split second before they strike. How pride always makes them predictable. You're not just fighting bodies, you're dismantling spirits. By your late teens, your win column looks ridiculous. More victories than birthdays. More bruised opponents than sake flavors. You don't stick around to bask in your fame. No trophy ceremonies. No parades. You just nod once, maybe mutter something profound like "humph," and head down the next dusty road, to the next opponent, to the next choice. Because somewhere inside you, you know you're no longer fighting for money or even survival. You're fighting because it's shaping you into something unstoppable. Something even you are only beginning to glimpse. By your late teens, you've carved out quite a reputation. Something between terrifying sword prodigy and that slightly unnerving guy who might eat nails for breakfast. What really makes you stand out isn't just your fight record. It's the fact that you refuse to do what everyone expects. You swear no allegiance to any lord. You bind yourself to no dojo or warband. You are proudly, stubbornly, a Ronin, a masterless samurai. in a culture where who you serve is almost more important than who you are. This is basically like showing up to a royal banquet in muddy rags and challenging the host to an arm wrestling match. Respectable samurai look at you as if you're some kind of walking scandal. No master, no patron, no permanent address. Surely he must be insane. But here's the thing they don't understand. Freedom is your sharpest sword. With no master to impress, you answer only to yourself. No political games. You spend your energy perfecting your skills instead of polishing someone else's boots. With no castle to protect, you carry your entire life with you. Light, fast, ready. Sure, life is hard. You don't get fancy armor for free. You don't attend elegant tea ceremonies where noble ladies giggle behind silk fans. You don't even have a reliable dinner most nights. One memorable week, you survived entirely on stolen radishes and dubious river fish. But what you do get is priceless. The ability to evolve, adapt, and grow beyond the rigid confines set by tradition. Everywhere you go, lords and generals try to recruit you. Some offer gold, others fine horses, land, silk kimonos. Some even offer daughters. Although frankly, given your wild appearance and constant smell of campfire, it's unclear if those offers are serious or merely optimistic. And each time you bow, more or less, and refuse, because your path is not paved with gold, but with blood, sweat, and silent revelations. You're not here to be anyone's servant. You're here to master something greater. The art of war, the art of strategy, and perhaps the art of mastering yourself. You are Miyamoto Musashi, masterless, fearless, and barely beginning. Somewhere between your 100th victory and your 1,000th mosquito bite sleeping under the stars, something shifts within you. Fighting isn't just about strength. It isn't just about speed. It's about seeing the world differently. You begin to realize the sword is just the surface. Beneath every clash of steel is a battle of minds, a silent conversation in feints, pressure, rhythm, and fear. Victory doesn't belong to the fastest or even the strongest. It belongs to whoever understands. So you begin to think differently. When you approach an opponent now, you don't just study their stance or their sword. You study them. How they hold tension in their shoulders, how they blink when nervous, how they hesitate when a gust of wind kicks dust into their face. You start to predict moves before they happen. Not with magic, but with a brutal attention to human weakness. You realize a duel is won long before the first sword is swung. It's won the moment your opponent doubts himself. It's won the moment he feels like prey, and you feel like the storm. In many ways, you stop fighting people altogether. You start fighting their intentions. That's when you truly begin to separate yourself from the rest of the samurai world. While others are busy memorizing ancient techniques and polishing the same boring sword forms, you're inventing something new, something terrifyingly effective. You turn dueling into lightning-fast chess. Sometimes you win before the opponent even realizes the fight has begun. A subtle shift in your stance, a smile, a real one, or something close enough to chill their blood. An unexpected movement that breaks all rules of style and tradition. And when they fall, bewildered and defeated, it's not just because you hit harder. It's because you lived one move ahead, and they never realized it. You start to see life itself that way. Everything is strategy. Everything is timing. Everything is the balance between stillness and sudden, relentless action. The sword is just a tool. The real weapon is the mind. And yours, sharpened by hardship, hunger, and endless battle, is becoming as lethal as any blade you could ever wield. Somewhere on the endless roads you traverse, battered, bruised, and slightly more mosquito-bitten than any legendary warrior should admit, you have another revelation. Why settle for one sword when you can wield two? Yes, two hands, two swords. A revolutionary concept that every proper samurai in their polished castles would disdain, while carefully adjusting their very formal, very traditional armor. You, however, don't have the luxury of worrying about tradition. You worry about staying alive. You worry about winning. So you begin training relentlessly. A katana in one hand, a wakizashi, the shorter sword, in the other. Most people's brains would short-circuit just thinking about it. But how do you parry and strike at the same time? But the styles, the schools, the sacred forms. Meanwhile, you're in the forest, smashing tree trunks, learning to move both arms independently, flowing like water, unpredictable as a summer storm. At first, it's clumsy. You drop the swords. You trip over your own feet. In one memorable moment, you nearly disarmed yourself. But slowly, painfully, something clicks. Two swords. Not a disorganized chaos, but a deadly dance. One hand deflects, the other strikes. Left, right, left. A rhythm as natural as breathing. You are no longer bound by the rigid patterns taught in dojos. You create your own rhythm, your own style. And soon, your two-sword technique, Naiten Ichiryu, becomes as essential a part of you as your own heartbeat. The beauty of it all is that no one knows how to fight you. Single sword fighters are confused. Lancers are frustrated. Archers don't even get a chance to be frustrated. Your enemies expect one threat. They receive two. They prepare for a sword duel. They are overwhelmed by a hurricane. The more formal samurai shake their heads in disgust, muttering into their sake about the disrespect for centuries of tradition. But you don't listen to them. You're too busy surviving, winning, innovating. You don't fight for style points. You fight to hack a new path through a rigid, dying world. A path where adaptability, not ancestry, is the true mark of mastery. Two swords, one purpose, victory, and you're just getting started. By now, you've carved out quite a reputation. You're the storm that rolls into town, smashes the local champion, and vanishes before anyone can even begin to carve your name on a wooden plaque. But eventually, storms need bigger mountains to crash against. Enter the Yoshioka school. The Yoshioka clan isn't just any village dojo. They're elite. They're powerful. Their name carries weight in Kyoto, the cultural heart of Japan, a city full of silk robes, neatly trimmed beards, and egos the size of small mountains. The Yoshioka don't just teach swordsmanship. They're practically an institution. Winning a duel against them would be like an upstart garage band bursting into a royal opera and stealing the show, which naturally sounds like exactly the kind of thing you'd do. So you march into Kyoto, dusty, disheveled, and probably smelling faintly of river water and stubbornness, and issue a challenge to Yoshioka Seijuro, the head of the school. Seijuro, being a proud man and utterly convinced you're just a wild vagrant with a death wish, accepts. The fight is arranged. The formalities are settled. Everyone expects it to be a quick, embarrassing rout for you. A public reminder that proper warriors aren't outfought by wild ronin. Everyone but you. When the duel arrives, there are no elaborate speeches, no dramatic poses, just you, still as a stone in a riverbed, facing a high society swordsmanship master. And when the moment comes, you don't hesitate. You steamroll his defenses like a typhoon through a paper screen. Seijuro is defeated, not politely, not ceremoniously, but brutally. The once proud Yoshioka master is humiliated in front of his students, his patrons, and half the gossipy citizens of Kyoto. And you don't stick around to gloat. You don't strut through the streets collecting applause. You rise once, maybe adjust your ragged cloak against the breeze, and fade back into the city's shadowed alleys. Because in your mind, there's still no ultimate victory, only the next duel, only the next challenge. You've shaken the foundations of an empire, but you know the Yoshioka won't let this insult pass without blood, and you are ready for them. The Yoshioka school does not take humiliation well. Losing to a wild ronin, a man who probably sleeps closer to goats than to gilded screens, is not just a bruise on their pride, it's a full-body wound. So, naturally, they do what any prestigious institution with a wounded ego would do. They send the next brother. Enter Yoshioka Denshichiro. You could say Denshichiro is Seijuro's bigger, angrier sequel. More muscle, more rage, less patience. He challenges you to another formal duel, determined to wipe away the family's shame, preferably by wiping you out of existence. The city buzzes with anticipation. Another Musashi fight. Finally, the wild swordsman will meet his match. Will honor be restored? Could someone pass the sake? You, however, are as calm as ever. If Denshichiro thinks anger is going to win this fight, he clearly hasn't been paying attention. The day of the duel arrives. The crowd gathers. Bets are made. Vendors sell grilled fish skewers to excited spectators, because nothing pairs better with mortal combat than a light snack. When Denshichiro strides into the arena, he looks like a human-shaped storm cloud, armed, armored, and bristling with fury. You look pretty much the same as always. Worn sandals, plain clothes, a look in your eyes that says, "I've already plotted 3 ways to end this, and 2 of them are slightly insulting." The duel begins. Denshichiro charges heavy and hard, intent on crushing you with brute force. But you, light, fast, strategic, move just out of his reach, reading his every move like a poorly written play. A few exchanges later, it's over. You deliver a devastating blow. Denshichiro collapses. The Yoshioka's last hope crumbles into the dust. The crowd is stunned again. Some gasp, others cheer. Some immediately reconsider their life choices. The once powerful Yoshioka clan has now lost 2 sons to a disheveled barefoot duelist who probably sharpened his sword on a rock that morning. And you don't make speeches, you don't make proud boasts. You simply turn and walk away, silent, steady, like a force of nature that needs no explaining. But deep down, you know the Yoshioka aren't finished. They have one desperate move left, and it's going to be anything but honorable. Defeat hurts. Public, humiliating defeat burns like pouring sake on an open wound. And after losing not 1, but 2 heirs to your blade, the once proud Yoshioka school totters on the brink of collapse. They have a choice: accept the losses with dignity, or toss what remains of their honor into a bonfire and stake everything on one last desperate strike. Guess which option they choose. The Yoshioka declare another duel, but this time it's not a simple man-to-man confrontation. Oh no, they plan an ambush. The target, obviously, you. The goal: to wipe that smug look off your face and restore honor with a flurry of blades. Their strategy is simple: lure you into a final duel against Matashiro, the young new head of the family, a boy barely old enough to shave, propped up as a figurehead, while dozens of armed Yoshioka warriors hide nearby, ready to spring the moment you show yourself. Fair? Absolutely not. But fairness left the conversation 2 dead brothers ago. Now, here's what makes you you. You know it's a trap. You can smell it like rotten fish from a mile away. And what do? You show up early, before the ambush is fully set, before the hidden swordsmen are in position, before anyone expects you. You slip through the twilight mist like a ghost, sword already drawn. Madashiro barely has time to shriek before you cut him down. A clean, quick, lightning-efficient strike. Chaos erupts. Yoshioka men boil out of the shadows like furious ants. Dozens of them. Gleaming swords, shouts, curses, your name. And you don't freeze. You don't hesitate. You move, fast, precise, a blur of deadly efficiency. You cut through the would-be ambushers like a blade through rice paper, slipping between their ranks, disappearing into the twilight before they can even organize. By the time they realize what's happened, it's long since done. A rumor rides the wind. The Yoshioka school, once the pride of Kyoto, collapses in disgrace. And you don't stick around to celebrate. You just keep walking. Because for Miyamoto Musashi, the journey isn't about revenge, it's about perfection. And perfection demands more than victory, it demands evolution. After your dismantling of the powerful Yoshioka school, your legend explodes like a firecracker in a dry village square. Only, instead of awe and admiration, your name carries a new flavor of fear. You are no longer seen as just a dangerous swordsman, but as something more. Something harder to define, and even harder to face. News spreads across the provinces like wildfire. Musashi doesn't just defeat opponents, he destroys families. One Musashi is worth an entire battalion. If you see a disheveled man carrying 2 swords and smelling faintly of river mud, run. And here's the crazy part. It's not even an exaggeration. At this point, it seems armies would be better equipped to fight you than individual swordsmen. One-on-one duels are child's play. Ambushes? Try harder. Even groups of trained fighters can barely touch you. You've reached a level where facing you feels less like fighting a man and more like trying to fistfight a storm. Part of this is skill, sure. Your 2-sword technique, your strategy, your raw speed are unmatched. But the real secret weapon is psychological warfare. Most men are defeated before they even draw their swords. When they hear your name, they recall the stories. The child who killed an adult samurai at 13, the ronin who dismantled the Yoshioka like dry twigs, the wanderer who uses anything, a wooden oar, a random branch, probably a particularly angry goose if need be, to achieve victory. They walk onto the dueling ground, already sweating, already doubting. And doubt, to you, smells better than victory, because you've learned something crucial. A sword can kill the body, but fear kills the soul. Sometimes you win duels without even swinging your sword. An opponent sees that cold, steady look in your eyes, that slight tilt of your head that says, "I've already killed you in my mind," and they crumble. Some surrender, some flee. A few bravely charge, only to realize too late they are charging a force of nature. You are no longer just Musashi the duelist. You are Musashi the storm. Musashi the unstoppable. And as you continue to walk the shattered roads of Japan, one thing remains clear. It will take more than numbers, more than swords, to stop you now. With the Yoshioka crushed and your reputation soaring, you could have done what most warriors dreamed of. found a rich lord to serve, earned a fancy title, maybe even secured a castle with decent plumbing. But no, you choose the road again, because deep down you know that castles are cages, even if they're gilded. And so begins the long, winding chapter of your life, full of dust and thirst, the years of wandering. You wander from province to province like a leaf caught by the wind. No plan, no map, just one constant: the search for mastery. Wherever you go, you seek new opponents, new styles, new ideas, sword masters, monks, spearmen, bandits. It doesn't matter who or what they are. If they know something you don't, you want to face them. Sometimes you challenge them. Sometimes they challenge you. Sometimes you just stumble upon them while trying to steal a particularly juicy rice ball and somehow end up in a duel. The traveling life is messy. Your style evolves again and again, like a river carving new paths through stone. You adapt, refine, and discard what doesn't serve you. You don't fight for money. You don't fight for fame. You fight for the thrill of becoming. Every opponent is a mirror showing you your own flaws, and every time you break that mirror, you come out sharper. Your clothes grow even rougher, your sword even faster, your mind even more dangerous. People begin to tell stories about you, strange, mythical tales. Musashi fought 3 men at once, using only a fan. Musashi defeated a master spearman with a broken fishing pole. Musashi is said to have once stared so intently at a bear that the bear apologized and left. Are they true? Maybe yes, maybe no. But you don't bother to correct anyone because you're not interested in polishing your legend, but in sharpening your soul. And if that path leads you deeper into forests, over frozen rivers, through dusty mountain passes, so be it. The road is your home now, the infinite horizon, your companion. While other warriors bind their fates to lords and lineages, you bind yours only to the sword and to the endless, ravenous pursuit of something greater than victory, something like true understanding. And you know you're getting close. As the miles tick by and the seasons blur, something unexpected begins to stir deep within your battle-hardened soul, a longing for something more. Not more jewels, not more blood, not even more victories, but something quieter, something deeper. Art. It begins subtly. After a long day of training or travel, you find yourself picking up a brush instead of a sword. At first, your calligraphy looks like what happens when a cat runs across fresh ink. Not exactly museum quality, but just like with swordsmanship, you don't expect to be good immediately. You expect to become so through patience, discipline, relentless practice. Soon you're painting landscapes, hills, rivers, birds frozen in mid-flight. The brushstrokes are almost like sword movements, fluid, precise, alive, and you realize something profound. The same spirit that guides your blade can guide your hand. Swordsmanship and art are not opposites. They are twins. Both demand presence, both demand balance, both demand the ability to see the world clearly and then leave your mark on it with grace and certainty. It's not just painting either. You carve wooden sculptures. You practice the tea ceremony with the care of a general preparing for war. You study poetry, philosophy, Zen Buddhism. You become strange, in a way. A ronin who can kill 10 men before breakfast and paint a delicate ink wash of a cherry blossom branch for lunch. Your comrades don't quite know what to make of this. Musashi, the guy who crushed the Yoshioka, the guy who fought Sasaki Kojiro, is now painting. Some laugh, others scoff. You don't care, because you see something they don't. Victory is temporary. Mastery is eternal. A sword wins battles. Art wins immortality. And deep down, you grasp something even more important. One day your body will fail. Your sword hand will slow. The victories will end. But your mind, your spirit, your vision, those can endure through ink, through wood, through words. You are no longer just a warrior. You are becoming a creator, carving your spirit into the world, one perfect brushstroke at a time. And as you sit by a quiet river, brush in hand, a smile plays on your face. The path is wider than you ever imagined, and it's just beginning. As you step into your 30s, with a trail of defeated opponents stretching behind you like a particularly violent parade, a new name begins to reach your ears: Sasaki Kojiro. At first, it's just whispers, in smoky inns and dusty crossroads. There's a man with a blade like lightning. His sword is so long it could pluck a bird from the sky. He's undefeated, just like you. Interesting. You're not the type to get flustered by reputation. After all, you're the reputation other warriors have nightmares about. But Sasaki Kojiro is different. He's not an arrogant dojo master waiting to be shamed. He's not a noble's desperate bodyguard clinging to old ways. He's fast, lethal, precise, and he carries a sword so absurdly long, the monohoshizao, or drying pole, that you half wonder if he's compensating for something. You don't say it aloud. That would be rude. Kojiro's style, the swallow cut, is famous. It mimics a bird's wing movement. Quick, elegant, impossible to predict. He's not just good. He's a force of nature, a mirror of you, but polished, majestic, almost civilized, and in a strange way, you're excited. Finally, a true challenge. Not another pompous know-it-all to humiliate. Not another mob of amateurs to outsmart. Someone who might actually force you to reach deeper. Someone who could sharpen you in ways no duel ever has. Finally, word reaches you that Kojiro has been named a Lord's fencing master. Great honor, great pay, new clothes. You, meanwhile, still sleep in barns, occasionally using your traveling cloak as a blanket and breakfast napkin. But that doesn't matter, because you know that paths like yours and Kojiro's are not meant to run parallel forever. They're meant to collide spectacularly. Rumors swell around you like clouds gathering before a storm. Two undefeated swordsmen, two masters of timing and death, two legends, but one destiny. And somewhere inside, beneath the calm and the calligraphy, the old fire stirs again. The wolf raises its head. The blade hums with anticipation. You smile slightly, because you know what's coming, and you're ready. The challenge doesn't arrive wrapped in gold or sung by heralds. It comes in stark, silent words, carried by wary messengers. Sasaki Kojiro has accepted. He will meet you on the battlefield. No politics, no lords, no armies. Just two men, two swords, and a promise hanging in the damp air. The duel is arranged for a small, rocky island in the Kanman Straits, Ganryujima, remote enough for privacy, flat enough for a clean fight, dramatic enough for the gods themselves to lean in and watch. You hear the details with the same calm you've maintained for years. Where others would pace nervously, sharpening blades and writing tearful farewell letters, you barely shrug. Challenge accepted. Still, you prepare, but not in the way your enemies would expect. You don't spend sleepless nights polishing armor. You don't compose elaborate death poems or fret over ceremonial attire. You don't even bother cutting your hair, judging by the wild look you sport these days. Instead, you sharpen your mind. You You study Kojiro like a hunter studies dangerous prey. Learn his timing, his technique, his habits. Fast, precise, lethal at mid-range. Good, because you've already decided you're not going to fight Kojiro at his own game. That would be suicide. You're going to change the game entirely. You request a small boat to take you to the island on the day of the duel. You carve a wooden sword, a bokken, from an oar during the journey. A simple piece of wood, roughly the length of Kojiro's absurdly long blade. No polished steel, no gleaming armor, just rough wood and sharp intent, because you grasp something most warriors never learn. Victory isn't about using the best weapon, but about using the best mind. As you sail toward the island with the wind in your hair and salt on your skin, you feel it. The stillness before the storm, the spiraling tension of two titans about to collide, the quiet, thrilling certainty that this day, this fight, will echo through time. And you smile a little, because you're not here to survive. You're here to win. The boat bumps against the shore of Ganryujima, and you step out, cradling your makeshift wooden sword, an oar carved, rough, unpolished, still smelling faintly of river water and stubbornness. Across the beach, you see him. Sasaki Kojiro. He's already waiting, tall, lean, composed, dressed in elegant robes, carrying his famous monohoshi zao, the drying pole. A sword so long it looks like it belongs on a ship's mast, not a duel. He's polished, prepared, perfect. And you? You look like you arrived on the beach by accident, after a particularly lively night in a tavern. The crowd, attendants, witnesses, curious fishermen, murmurs as they see you. Some laugh, others shake their heads. He's late! It's disrespectful. He's armed with a stick. Kojiro's lips tighten into a sneer. He's already angry, already off balance. Good. You planned it that way. You weren't late out of arrogance, but to unsettle him, to break his rhythm before blades crossed, because you understand that a duel isn't won when swords clash, but the moment the opponent loses control of their mind. Kojiro, unable to contain himself, draws his massive sword with a fluid, beautiful motion. They say the swallow cut, his signature technique, can slice a bird's wings in mid-flight. Fast, precise, impossibly lethal. But as he moves, something happens. Something subtle. Something crucial. He hesitates, just for an instant, unsettled by your ragged appearance, your audacity, the absurd sight of a man calmly advancing with an oar. And that's all you need. You lunge forward, faster than a striking hawk, your wooden sword whistling through the salty air. A single, perfect strike. The crack of wood against skull echoes across the island. Kojiro collapses. Instantaneous. Final. The mighty Sasaki Kojiro, the swallow cutter, the master swordsman, the undefeated legend, lies broken on the sand. Silence falls. Mouths hang open. Fishermen stop chewing their rice balls mid-bite. Even the seagulls seem momentarily stunned. And you lower your oar, breathing steadily, heart calm. Another duel, another victory. But something in the air feels different, heavier. Because today you didn't just defeat a swordsman, you ended an era. And deep down, you know victory will never taste the same again. Ganryujima lies quiet after the clash, waves lazily lapping at the blood-flecked sand, the wind whispering through the grass, as if afraid to disturb what just happened. You stand over Sasaki Kojiro's fallen body, the crude wooden sword still heavy in your hand. Victory complete. But as the adrenaline fades, something colder seeps into your bones. You look around. The witnesses, the samurai attendants, even the fishermen, stare at you as if they're seeing a ghost, not a man. There are no triumphant cheers, no shouts of celebration, just silence, a heavy, uncertain silence that sticks to your skin stronger than sweat, because today wasn't just another duel. It wasn't a local champion or an arrogant heir you outmatched. It was him, Sasaki Kojiro, a sword saint in his own right, the one man they thought could stand your equal, and now he lies there, crumpled like a broken fan. You realize something in that moment, something you hadn't truly understood until now. At a certain height, there are no more rivals, no more equals, just a solitary peak, far above the clouds, and you standing there, alone. You turn unceremoniously and walk away, leaving the body behind, leaving the stares, the judgments, the whispered legends already beginning to sprout like weeds in the sand. As you board the small boat to return to the mainland, the oar-turned weapon clanks against the side of the vessel, awkward and out of place, just as you feel inside. The boatman, an old man with weathered hands, rose in silence, not daring to speak. You stare at the shrinking island, a tiny patch of land where two destinies collided and only one survived. Ganryujima will forever be linked to your name. Poets will sing of it. Scribes will exaggerate it. Elders will argue about it in smoky inns you'll never visit. But you feel no joy, no pride, only a sense of something irreversible. The path you walk now was not the path of a swordsman seeking glory, but the path of a swordsman seeking meaning, in a world where fewer and fewer opponents remain. As the oar dips into the water, it glitters, and the wind carries your name across the waves. You wonder silently, what is left to conquer when you have already defeated everything? Kojiro's death lingers in the air long after you leave Ganryujima, not as a triumph, not as a trophy, but as a weight. You try to dismiss it at first, another duel, another victory like the dozens before. But this one is different, because Kojiro wasn't some thug from a remote village. He wasn't a cocky dojo master with more pride than skill. He was a true swordsman, a mirror of your own relentless pursuit of mastery, and you killed him. Not just physically, but spiritually. You shattered a man who, if the world had been kinder, might have stood beside you, not opposite you. People celebrate, of course. They tell the story 100 different ways. Musashi was late to unnerve Kojiro. Musashi carved an oar sword on the way just to mock him. Musashi cut him down before Kojiro could even blink. The tales grow bigger, louder, more ridiculous. By next month, someone will probably claim you rode to the island on the back of a giant fish and fought with a tree trunk. You hear these stories, you even smile at some of them, but deep down, none of it feels like a victory. It feels like the closing of a door you can never reopen. With Kojiro gone, the world feels smaller, duller, a little more empty, because now you know there are fewer and fewer men left who can face your blade with true understanding, fewer who can dance with you on the edge of death, seeing the same beautiful and terrifying truth. You didn't just defeat Kojiro, you outlived him, and somehow that feels like a heavier burden. Late at night, sitting by a lonely campfire, you catch yourself replaying the fight in your mind, not with regret, not with guilt, but with a kind of painful respect. Kojiro was your greatest challenge, and now he is a ghost who will walk beside you for the rest of your days. You stare into the flames. The road ahead stretches. Longer, lonelier, quieter. And somewhere inside you understand. The more victories you claim, the more solitude you will inherit. It's not the jewels that will break you. It's the emptiness they leave behind. After Ganryujima, the world hails you as unstoppable. The swordsman who defeated Sasaki Kojiro, the ronin who fears nothing, the legend who walks among mortals. And yet, despite all the admiration, all the whispered awe that follows your steps like dust, you feel nothing. Victory used to burn bright in your chest, a fire fueled by the thrill of survival, the hunger for mastery. Now it flickers down, starved of meaning. You wander through villages where children pretend to be you, swinging sticks and shouting your name. In inns, drunks raise their cups to your honor, spinning tales so grand you wouldn't even recognize yourself in them. Musashi fought 10 men at once and didn't spill a drop of his tea. He can slice a falling leaf in half from 20 paces. He once beat an entire dojo using nothing but his stare. You smile politely when you hear these stories. You nod, you bow. You drink their rice wine. But inside it's like chewing ashes, because you know the truth. They don't know. The victories were never about the fame, never about building a legend. They were about the search, the endless, painful, beautiful search for something perfect, something whole. And now that search feels empty. You used to dream of opponents worthy of you. Now you dream of quiet rivers, empty roads, the wind in the pine trees, because there are no more opponents to chase. The world is too small now, too fragile. You watch other warriors polishing their armor, burnishing their reputations, chasing titles and courting favor. You feel like a wolf among domestic dogs. You don't belong in courts or castles. You don't belong on thrones or under banners. You belong nowhere and everywhere. Victory, you realize, is a strange kind of death, the death of effort, the death of hunger. You've won too much, and the price of that is solitude, a deep, vast loneliness that no drink, no song, no cheering crowd can ever fill. So you keep walking, not toward glory, not toward battle, but toward something quieter, something you can almost hear at the edge of the wind, a whisper of a different kind of mastery, a mastery not of others, but of yourself. The road stretches on, but your steps begin to slow, not from age. Your body is still nimble, your reflexes still faster than a striking snake. No, it's something deeper, something pulling at the edges of your soul, whispering that the battles you need to fight now are no longer out there, but within. You begin to withdraw from the life of endless duels, not because you fear defeat, but because victory no longer feeds you. You've slain giants, you've conquered masters, and in doing so, you realize the only true enemy left is yourself. You spend more time alone now, days, weeks, even months wandering the mountains and forests in solitude. No crowds, no challenges, just the whispering bamboo, the rushing rivers, the endless, watchful sky. The sword remains at your side, but you draw it less and less. Instead, you draw inks onto paper, creating calligraphy that flows like water. You carve wood, shaping figures, not to kill, but to create. The same discipline that honed your murderous edge now turns inward, honing your spirit. You study Zen Buddhism more deeply, not in smoky temples, but on your own, through experience. You meditate under waterfalls, fast until your body feels lighter than air. You sit in perfect stillness, hours passing like seconds. You begin to understand that mastery isn't about domination, but about harmony, balance, knowing when to strike and when not to. You realize that the perfect duel isn't one where you crush your opponent, but one where you never have to fight. Conflict, you see, is a weave. True mastery is stepping aside before it crashes. The wild wolf who tore through Japan's finest swordsman is still inside you, but now he sits quietly at the edge of your consciousness, not caged, not broken, tamed not by fear, but by wisdom. People still seek you out, of course, impetuous youngsters who want to test themselves, old masters desperate for one last taste of glory. Sometimes you fight them, sometimes you dismiss them with a word, a glance, and in both, you are victorious. Because the battle for your soul, the hardest battle of all, is one you are finally beginning to win. Finally, even the open road feels too crowded, even the mountains too noisy. You need a quieter place, a place where the last distractions, fame, memory, even ambition cannot find you. So you retreat to a cave, not a grand temple, not a castle on a hill, but a simple, cold, damp cave dug into the side of a lonely mountain. Its name is Regondo, the cave of the spirit rock. Fitting. You carry little with you, a few scrolls, a brush and ink, your swords, of course, but they remain sheathed, gathering dust as days turn into months. Within the stone walls, you are no longer Musashi the warrior, but Musashi the student, a student of stillness, a student of death, a student of life itself. The cave teaches you differently than the sword did. It teaches you patience, the way dripping water hollows the hardest stone. It teaches you humility, when even the spiders lazily weaving webs across your sleeping mat seem wiser than the chatter of human ambition. And above all, it teaches you perspective. For the first time, you truly see the duels, the victories, the shattered schools and humbled lords. They were just shadows on the wall. The real battle was never with them. It was always with yourself. You write feverishly in the gloom, creating essays on strategy, philosophy, the mind, and the void that binds all things. Every word is a duel against ignorance. Every sentence is a parry against ego. Your brush becomes your sword now, quick, deliberate, relentless against falsehood. In the silence of Regondo, you finally hear the faint music that always played beneath the clash of steel, the song of mastery, of balance, of understanding. From time to time, people come looking for you, curious students, aspiring challengers, pilgrims hoping for a glimpse of the legend. Some you receive kindly, others you dismiss with a few harsh truths. But mostly you are alone, and you are at peace with it. Because you know now that true strength isn't about defeating others, but about mastering the one thing that truly matters, yourself. And deep within, beneath the stone and the silence, you are winning the greatest victory of your life, one breath at a time. Within the cold embrace of Regondo Cave, with the wind sighing at the entrance like an old friend, you decide it is time. Time to transmit what you have learned, not through another duel, not through another battle, but through words. You sit cross-legged on the bare rock, brush in hand, ink ready, and begin to write the Book of 5 Rings. Not a diary, not a cheat sheet of your victories, but a guide, a manual of the sword. Yes, but far more than that. A map of the mind, a blueprint for mastering conflict and mastering life itself. You divide your teachings into 5 scrolls, each representing an element: earth, water, fire, wind, void. Each scroll builds upon the last, a layered strategy for anyone seeking true understanding. The Book of Earth: foundations, stability, knowing your stance, your base, whether in battle or in life. The Book of Water: adaptability, fluidity, moving around obstacles, flowing through challenges instead of crashing against them. The Book of Fire: aggression, timing, knowing when to strike, when to unleash force without hesitation. The Book of Wind: perspective, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of others, not to copy them, but to know yourself better. And finally, the Book of Void, the most mysterious of all, the space between thought and action, the state of pure awareness where mastery truly resides. You write with simplicity, without embellishment. There is no need for grand words. Truth needs no decoration. Every line is forged like a blade on an anvil, direct, sharp, tested in the crucible of real battle and hard-won wisdom. You do not write for fame. You do not write to impress scholars. You write because the path you have walked has shown you something precious, and it would be a crime to let it die with you. Every brushstroke feels like breathing life into a second self, a Musashi who will endure long after your bones turn to dust. You know that most will misunderstand it. Some will skim the surface. A few might grasp its depths. But that is enough, because mastery was never meant for the masses. It is a narrow path walked by the few willing to persevere, to suffer, to sharpen themselves against the world until they become human-shaped blades. And as you put the final period on the last scroll, you lay down the brush and smile. Your greatest victory is done. Your legacy is written. The seasons change outside the cave entrance. Leaves fall, rivers freeze, flowers bloom, and you feel it deep in your bones. The end is near. Not a sudden enemy to be outsmarted, not a sneak attack to be parried. No, this is the only opponent no sword can defeat: death. You greet it as you have greeted every opponent, with calm, with respect, without fear. Your body, once nimble and unbreakable, has grown slower. The hand that carved legends from the air now trembles slightly as it lifts a brush. The endless miles you once walked effortlessly now weigh heavily on your legs. But your mind is clearer than ever. You do not cling to life like a miser clings to coins. You do not rage against the fading light. Instead, you prepare as a true warrior does, deliberately, honorably. You design your own death as you designed your victories, with precision, with dignity, with full awareness. You dress in your finest clothes, not a lord's robes, but simple, clean garments, worthy of a man who has nothing left to prove. You sit cross-legged, your swords at your side, one hand on your katana, one hand resting gently on your wakizashi, not to fight, but to honor. The 2 blades that served you in 1,000 battles deserve to witness your last breath. Your students, the few you trust, gather silently outside the cave. They watch not with sadness, but with reverence, for they understand. This is not a death of defeat, but a death of mastery. You close your eyes, inhale the mountain air, fresh, sharp, alive. You feel the pulse of the earth beneath you. You feel the blood slowing in your veins. No fear, no regret. Only acceptance, only peace. With one last steady motion, you sit perfectly still and pass from this world, a warrior to the very end. No drama, no desperately clinging to life, just stillness, just strength. Miyamoto Musashi dies as he lived, undefeated, unbroken, untamed. And as your spirit slips beyond the veil, somewhere in the distant distance 1,000 cherry blossoms drift on the wind, and the sword falls silent. Long after your body fades into the quiet earth, your name refuses to die. It clings to the mountains, rides the rivers, echoes in the halls of warriors and scholars alike. Miyamoto Musashi, the man who lived by no one's rules, who carved his path with blade and mind, who turned battles into art and solitude into a realm. They tell your story in ways both grand and strange. Some say you fought 100 men alone. Some say you could kill a bird in mid-flight with a single throw of a wooden sword. Some even say you were a demi-demon, born not of a woman, but of the storm itself. You, who once slept under trees with nothing but your swords and stubborn will, now live in ink and legend, through scrolls, paintings, novels, plays. Your Book of 5 Rings becomes a treasure, not just for swordsmen, but for generals, businessmen, philosophers, anyone seeking to master conflict, mastery, or even themselves. In a world that changes with each passing season, your teachings remain stubbornly true. Observe clearly, move decisively, adapt like water, strike without hesitation, know yourself completely. You become more than a warrior. You become an ideal, a symbol of the eternal struggle between discipline and instinct, a reminder that true mastery is not about conquering the world, but about mastering the storm within. Statues are raised in your honor, swords are named after you, video games, manga, films. Your spirit finds new forms you could never have imagined, fighting on screens and pages. But none of it captures the full truth, because the real Musashi is not the man with 2 swords standing triumphant over defeated foes. The real Musashi is the man in the cave, brush in hand, writing words for a future he would never see. The man who understood that strength without wisdom is hollow, that life without reflection is a dull blade. You are more than victories. You are more than battles. You are a path, a question, a mirror held up to anyone who dares to walk alone. And as centuries pass, as kingdoms rise and fall, one thing remains. Your story still whispers to those bold enough to listen. Walk the path, face yourself, become more. And somewhere deep in the stillness between heartbeats, the spirit of Musashi smiles. If someone were to ask hundreds of years after your death what Musashi's greatest lesson was, they might expect tales of swordsmanship, of technique, of brilliance in duels. And they would not be wrong, but they would not be entirely right either, because your greatest lesson was not how to win a fight, but how to live and how to die without fear. You taught that mastery is not just about defeating others, but about defeating the weakness within yourself, the fear of failure, the hunger for approval, the desperate need to cling to comfort and certainty. You showed that to walk the true path, you must be willing to walk it alone, without titles, without applause, without even the promise of success. You must be your own teacher, your own rival, your own flame in the darkness. Through your battles, through your solitude, through the simple, fierce grace of your life, you taught this unbreakable truth. Strength without purpose is hollow. Skill without spirit is meaningless. Victory without honor is ash. The duels were never the goal. the spilled blood, the shattered reputations, they were just echoes of a deeper struggle. The true enemy was always within, the doubts, the fears, the illusions, and you conquered them, not with brute force, but with clarity, with patience, with relentless and ruthless honesty. Your Book of 5 Rings is not a book on how to kill. It is a book on how to live strategically, wisely, and bravely. Even today, when a young fighter laces up his gloves, or a tired soul faces a crossroads, or a quiet mind seeks meaning in a noisy world, your spirit is there, not shouting, not boasting, just standing silently at the edge of the path, nodding once as if to say, "You already have everything you need. Now walk." And your life was a battle, your death was a meditation, and your legacy is a call, a challenge that stretches across the centuries to anyone bold enough to listen. Be like Musashi, not because he never lost, not because he never feared, but because he chose every day to master himself. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. And so the legend of Miyamoto Musashi does not end with his death, but transforms. It lives in every person who dares to seek mastery, not only in the sword, but in life itself. His spirit challenges us to find our own path, to forge our character with the discipline of a warrior and the wisdom of a sage. And on that journey, perhaps we can glimpse the true essence of Bushido. I hope this account has been helpful for your relaxation, or that it has at least taught you things. If so, subscribe to Silent of History, and let me know what other topics you would like me to discuss in the next video. Have a good night.